The information economy has arrived. The world is teeming with innovation as new business models reinvent every industry. InsideAnalysis is your source of information and insight about how to make the most of this exciting new era. Learn more at InsideAnalysis.com.
InsideAnalysis.com.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the only coast-to-coast radio show in the US of A that's all about the information economy. It's time for Inside Analysis. Eric Kavanaugh here. Fantastic show lined up for you today, folks. I'm very excited to talk about the creator economy. So what are the foundations of the creator economy? What is this thing? And it's all over the place now. It's not all that new. You go back to 2006 or so, and YouTube really pioneered all this stuff. But now you've got creators on all kinds of different platforms. TikTok, of course, has taken the world by storm. I always get upset when I think about TikTok because we kind of had TikTok. It was called Vine, and then Twitter bought it and killed it, and it was gone. But there you go. So now TikTok has taken over the world. So what is this creator economy, and why is it happening now? Well, social media, of course, is a big part of that. We have these platforms that you can leverage. Really smart people in Silicon Valley and elsewhere have built the foundation for you to just create your account and start marketing, start doing some interesting things. But there's also the financial side. How do you get paid? If someone had to manually go through and cut checks for these creators, there's no way in the world that's going to happen. So you have these new dynamic at scale systems, infrastructure, basically, that enables people to go create for a living. And it's funny because after we had planned this show, I was browsing around on LinkedIn and I saw a LinkedIn post all about the creator economy. And it was asking for tips and, who should do this? When should you quit your full-time job? Is their big question to become a full-time creator. And I would say, well, definitely think about that because it is hard to make money consistently. It takes time to build up a following. And you don't want to be too risky here. So the key is just start while you have your full-time job. You don't have to quit your full-time job to create some content and really get your feet wet and pick a platform. This has been a theory of mine for a long time, and we'll hear from our guest in a minute. We've got Josh Constine on from Signal Fire, venture partner there. We've got Paco Suro from Tipalti coming up, payment platform, so we can get into the weeds of this. But I remember determining probably 12, 13 years ago, in social, you kind of have to pick your poison and really focus on it and really build out. And of course, the challenge is that these big engines will change their rules, and they're not too proactive in telling you when the rules changes are coming. So you got to watch out for that. And it's a big deal, but it is very exciting. So I fully encourage everyone out there to go be yourself, man, to follow your passion, because that's what's going to drive you. If you want to be a creator, you need to focus on something that you want to learn about, that you want to talk about, that you want to engage people about. And it's an excellent way to make connections, to learn from the smartest people you can find, and to really make something out of your career. So with that, let's bring in our first guest, Josh Constine, as seen on CNN many, many times. So welcome to the show. Tell us a bit about yourself and Signal Fire and how you are encouraging this creator economy.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm Josh Constine. I'm a venture partner at early stage venture firm Signal Fire. I first got interested in the creator economy when I designed a master's program at Stanford University studying cyber sociology. So I was studying social networks like Facebook and Twitter, anonymity, privacy, and memes, and the way that memes and cultural ideas spread on the internet. And I really started to see these specific influencers that weren't the celebrities of old, but these newer types of influencers that really were relatable to their audience, that had a direct dialogue and community and communication with their fans, actually shaped their content in reaction to their fans, and wanted those fans to actually feel like they were part of the ownership and the creation process. And that was inspiring a lot more adulation or adoration and fandom than these traditional celebrities. And so I went on to work for Bon Jovi and the Killers, running their fan clubs, websites, merchandise, and ticketing, which was really fun. Brandon Flowers, lead singer of the Killers, amazingly nice guy. John Bon Jovi runs his organization, kind of like an organized crime ring. Everybody in the family has a job. The uncle's the manager, and the niece is the merchandise designer. But it's still a really great way to learn that the biggest money out there for the creator economy isn't in nickel and diming this super long tail of millions of fans, the way that a lot of people think of with like music, selling individual MP3s, or more recently, earning a few cents or a fraction of a cent off of the royalty from streaming a song. That's not actually how the biggest creators and entertainers in the world make their business. It's on maximizing the monetization of their biggest fans. It's that short head, not the long tail. And creators that really realize that, rather than trying to earn on ad views from a massive YouTube following, but instead, driving the sense of new forms of monetization, whether that's sponsored content, product placement, tipping from their fans, paid subscriptions, digital content sales, merchandise, shout outs, VIP experiences, and these kind of fan clubs are actually a much deeper way to earn money. But the big problem there is that you need to own your means of distribution. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But now I was then the editor at large for TechCrunch for about 8 years. I wrote 4,000 articles, was the #1 most cited tech journalist 2016 to 2020, wrote the first ever coverage of companies like Robinhood, Figma, Clubhouse, HQ Trivia, and eventually went on to join this venture fund called Signalfire. We're about $1 billion under management. We invest seed to Series B, writing lead checks for companies in the software infrastructure space across cybersecurity, DevOps, healthcare, but also things like Web3, the crypto economy, and the creator economy. And that's where I specialize. And what we really found was that there was this huge opportunity for creators to stop being exploited by the major social networks. You can think of this in a few kind of phases. So in the early phase of the creator economy, like phase 1, as you mentioned, it's YouTube. There was these first networks that came up, and the way that creators monetized was directly through an ad revenue share with that platform. So you had to make your content be really accessible to everybody, family friendly, open to the maximum audience, and maybe you'd get a share of that revenue from the platform. Then you saw in phase 2, the rise of the creator economy. This is when influencers started to gain really big followings on platforms like YouTube and Instagram. And instead of having to monetize directly through the platform, they started working directly with brands instead. So that's where you have had the wave of sponsored content rise up, where, instead of just slapping an ad, as a mid-roll or a pre-roll on your video, the creator actually talks about the product. They use it in their video. It's like sponsored placement, product placement that we know from, old school television and movies. But at the same time, what you found was that most of these creators were not really being paid anything. Instagram didn't pay anybody anything. Facebook didn't pay anybody anything. Twitter, a lot of these platforms did not provide any direct compensation to their creators. They were basically just exploiting them for their content, while meanwhile earning billions in profit themselves off of the ads that they put next to these creators' content. Right. And that's what created what I call the creator crisis, where tons of creators out there loving the sense of self-expression, building these huge audiences, but not really building a great business off of it. And that's what really leads us to phase 3 of the creator economy, where we kind of are now, which is that creators are realizing that to win, to really monetize, they need to own the means of distribution. It's kind of like, in the Marxist era, owning the means of production was what mattered, because there was a cost to each unit. There was the unit economics were a little bit tougher. And so if you owned the factory that produced everything, you were kind of at the center of the value creation. Right. But in the modern era, creating content is free. This is infinitely copyable. You can make it once and serve it to as many people as you want who are willing to listen to it or watch it. And so instead it wasn't about the production. You had democratized production tools, iMovie and Final Cut Pro and GarageBand and all these video editors and audio editors and podcast systems. But instead, what really mattered was owning the means of distribution, the way to get that content out to the fans. And you saw that largely controlled by these massive social networks. And they use their algorithms to filter what those people's fans saw. And largely what those platforms wanted to do was keep those fans on site. They didn't want you going off to that creator's website. They didn't want you paying them on some other platform. They wanted you browsing their content constantly in their feeds where they could show ads. And the creators got smart and they say, hey, we're sick of being exploited. We're sick of not earning this money. And we're sick of being beholden to these massive taxes and these black box box algorithms that we don't control. Let's own the means of distribution. Let's seize the means of distribution, create our own websites, our own communities, our own email and text message lists. Let's go directly to the fans. Let's cut out those middlemen. And there we can stop worrying about what the algorithm wants us to make, stop, cheapening ourselves and playing for the lowest common denominator. Instead, start making the content that really they are passionate about. And whenever you do something you're truly passionate about, that's where your biggest opportunity is, because that's when you're going to put your real heart into it. You're going to have a unique experience nobody else can copy, and you can really build a massive fan base doing that. And it doesn't have to be quite as big as the massive celebrities of old, but instead, if you really resonate with those people, if you speak to the niches and the subcultures that they care about, they will open their wallets for you. And that's creating this whole new sector of small business, creator-led businesses, which are basically the fastest growing segment of the small business world today. So that's my little overview of myself, Signalfire, our venture fund, my background, and my overarching unified theory of the creator economy. So sorry if I was a bit long-winded.
That's good. No, I mean, you hit several nails on the head here. I'm very encouraged by that because like you've said, don't rely on YouTube or Instagram or any of these guys to take care of you, because think about it, their impetus, their drive is to take care of their bottom line and their pockets and their money and their revenue. And these are very large organizations. Many of them are public companies. So they have this constant pressure to get more profit, more money, et cetera. And like you said, don't rely on that. Find other channels to get money. Lots of people want content. And the thing is, if you're a creator, you are necessarily creative, right? And creativity is such a fascinating concept. I've done creative work for a long time, and I know I often liken it to magic in a way, because if you think about in the old days, if you read the legends like of King Arthur and so forth, Merlin, if he cast a big spell, he would have to rest for a while because it took a lot. And if you write a book, I've never written a book, but I've written lots and lots of articles like you have. And I know after you write a bunch of stuff, you gotta like rest and recuperate yourself. But if you're doing what you like, you will absolutely be recuperated the next day or the next week or whatever, and you go do something else and you keep on creating. But the key, and you nailed it, is passion, right, Josh?
Exactly. I think you still do need those social networks as a creator. You need them for discovery. That's how you broaden your fan base. You get exposed to new fans through those algorithms, but you need to own the means of distribution to double down and really monetize them, because you never know when those major platforms and networks are going to shift in a new direction. You've seen this time and time again with Facebook, for instance. Facebook says, we're releasing a live video product. We want live video content. They go out there and they offer subsidies or a ton of algorithmic reach to any creator willing to make live video. And then a year or two later, they say, we're kind of moving on from this. We don't think this is as big of a business as we expected. We're cutting those subsidies. We're reducing the reach of those live videos. And now all these newsrooms or creators that pivoted to focusing on live video, they got to lay off their video teams. They have to completely reroute their strategy. And they realize that they've been building Facebook's audience this whole time, not their own. And so I think that concept of owning the means of distribution is really critical. And like you said, the mental health aspect of creativity is also super important right now. Because especially now that some of these creators have been at it for 15 years or longer, they get burnt out. And there's not a lot of the same support systems we have for traditional employment out there for creators. There's not a paid time off system. If you leave and just, say you want to go on vacation for 2 weeks, which is totally normal for most people in the business world. If you stop posting to these social networks for 2 weeks, the network thinks, hey, you've abandoned your audience. Nobody's going to remember you. They don't care about you anymore. You don't care about us anymore. And they actually, when you come back, they'll show your videos, they'll show your content to fewer people, which is really devastating to creators. It means that they feel like they can never take a day off.
Right.
Some of these networks expect you to honestly post every single day. Instagram, TikTok, they will ding your reach if you don't post absolutely every day. Wow. And so I think one of the things we're going to see around the big networks is them trying to start to fix some of these mental health problems by offering algorithmic pauses where you could take some time off deliberately, let the network know you're not going to be there so that you can get that time off to recoup. But you're also seeing groups of creators unifying together, almost forming their own little unions to solve some of these problems. And so, I'm part of a group of other newsletter writers and former journalists called Type House. And if somebody wants to take a vacation or there's like some major tragedy in their life and they need their time off, but they've got this monthly subscription that people are paying for, they'll actually ask their fellow Type House members to fill in for them and say, hey, can you do a guest post for my newsletter this week so that I don't have to do my post this week?
Right.
It's so important that I keep things coming from my fans to make them feel respected, but I just can't do that here. And there's nobody else to step in. So creators kind of have to build their own, almost like a newsroom, almost like a publisher. So if we've gone from, I think we're overarching in the creator economy, you're seeing this massive shift. You're going from publishers to personalities. It used to be that the massive media organizations were the ones that held the power. If you were a newspaper, if you were a TV show, you were the one that held the power. Those stars, those writers, they didn't have nearly as much reach without you. But what's happened over the last few years is with the advent of social media and things like Twitter, for instance, now a journalist can build up a massive personal following separate from the newspaper they work with. And then if they leave, they're not beholden to that newspaper. They bring their audience with them. And in fact, other newspapers will want to hire them because of that audience that they bring with them.
That's right.
And so I think that, and you're seeing that happen over and over again. It also is like that the editor at the newspaper used to have all the power. And now it's increasingly the reporters, because the reporters are the ones that build the direct emotional relationship with the fans. They're the ones that people are like, oh, I love reading their stuff. Nobody's like, oh, I love reading stuff edited by this guy. Like, that's just not a thing in the modern age. And so the power has shifted from the editors to the individual creators, from the publishers to the personalities. And I think that that's a really powerful concept for creators to embrace, and that no matter who you are, no matter what profession you're in, you should start to think about that yourself. Like, start a newsletter. Even if you don't publish a newsletter, put up a sign-up page for your newsletter. You know, I know people who got thousands of subscribers before they published their first issue of their newsletter, because people respected them. They knew what they were experts in. And then when you move on to your next job, you say, hey, it's not just my skills, I'm bringing my audience with me. And I think that's a really powerful concept. No matter what niche, no matter what type of business you're in, you could be in HR, you could be in sales, you could be in anything, and say, I'm just going to start writing about the thing that I care about. I'm going to start collecting an audience and community that cares about this thing. And you can, from there, launch your own creator business. It doesn't have to be TikTok. You don't have to be dancing. You could be creating a course. You could be writing a blog. It doesn't always have to be so flashy. And it's not all Gen Z. You know, Gen Z definitely is the core of the creator economy, but they don't own it. We, you know, as elder millennials, as Gen Xers, we built this internet, so it's still in part ours. And I think there's still a real place for us, just maybe not on video.
Yeah, and as a perfect example, Substack. Look at Substack and the people who are on Substack. Now, there are people who are New York Times journalists that are now gone. They're on Substack. Huge followings. And I mean, I cannot say amen enough to what you're saying in terms of building your list. An email database. Building an email database is worth its weight in gold, folks, because it's, especially if it's focused, because we're talking about being passionate in the creator economy. Focus on what you care about, write about what you know better than other people, and you've got a leg up on these big media companies because they're all kind of falling apart. I mean, we could talk about this all day. I've watched for the last 10 years as big media has just stumbled time and time again, still hasn't quite figured out how to leverage all these new technologies, new ways of making money. But don't touch that dial, folks. We'll be right back. You were listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
Take us to the future. All right, folks, take it to the future indeed. We're here on Inside Analysis with Josh Constine of Signal Fire. And also we've got Paco Suro, who was double booked. He's a busy guy, but he's calling in on the phone right now. He's a fintech expert. So let's maybe go to the phone. And Paco, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you're doing and how the financial picture here, the financial side of the equation, is really pretty important, because you have to streamline these processes. You can't have human beings in the loop on every payment going out if the creator economy is going to succeed. But Paco, tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing to enable the creator economy.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And thanks for accommodating the dial-in.
That's okay.
You know, quick introduction on myself. I'm the general manager for Global Partner Payments at Tipalti. We're an automation payables software provider. We focus primarily on two types of platforms, I would call them, or two types of spend: vendor spend and partner spend. And this conversation is, squarely on partner spend and how we think about the creator ecosystem. Our job is to help platforms facilitate and streamline their payables process to all their partners in their ecosystem. If I was going to sort of think about this in a few words or describe it in a few words, it's about scale and it's about reach. A creator, regardless of the medium, whether they're a developer or an influencer, a musician and whatnot, could be anywhere in the world. And that's where we stand in and really help solidify that experience on that ecosystem, on that platform for those partners. So that's a little bit about myself, a little bit about my company. I'm happy to take it from there, Eric.
Yeah. And so again, what we're talking about is being able to cater to thousands, tens of thousands, in many cases, millions. I mean, Josh Constine from Signalfire, he's got a whole website they put together kind of mapping out the creator economy, the number of people who are doing it, and the people who are very serious about it's a much smaller number than the people who are doing it generally. And that's the folks you kind of want to focus on. But what I think maybe a lot of people don't realize is how much the payments space and fintech in general, I mean, really what you're seeing is a revolution in fintech that is challenging the big banks. We as our business, we tried to go out and get some fractioning, I guess they call it, just in case we had a low cash flow month or something to be able to pay people. And none of the big banks would even talk to us, even though we've been with Chase for like 15 years. We couldn't even get anywhere. And then one day I'm logged into QuickBooks and I see a message that says, hey, through Fundbox, you can take money out on the invoices that you have. And I'm like, well, there you go. So you have these startups stepping into the picture. They've found a way to get money to provide liquidity to you. So it's fascinating to see the fintech world enabling this whole next generation of economies, the creator economy, the gig economy, the sharing economy. All this stuff is really taking off, right, Paco?
It is, and I think that Josh touched on this earlier, and it's sort of like the empowerment of the individual or the creator, of the creative. And that initially was facilitated through sort of these closed loop networks that still were pretty big ecosystems and created some opportunity. And maybe it wasn't democratic in nature, that is, that everybody had equal access to it and equal opportunity. But now what you're starting to see, and I'm an ex-Shopify employee back from earlier in my career, is sort of that next move, which is how does a creator sort of hang up their own shingle in different ways to really monetize on their brand and build their brand and sort of their financial well-being outside of things of the traditional sort of pockets, whether it's being on YouTube or on Twitch or whatnot. And so I think that's really interesting. I think the financial tools that are out there, I sort of, if I generalize it a little bit, I sort of think about the way that you described it, Eric, is really like a merchant, facing platform. So now you're facing your platform that faces the creative, and you're showing them ways of whether they need working capital to help, supersize something that they're doing on their front, whether they need banking services, they need payroll services because they run a small enterprise and whatnot. That's what financial technology does. And that's what it enables on platforms. And some platforms have become very good at surfacing those add-on services as additional features. And when I think about that, and when platforms do that, they're really now starting to make that shift to think about their creatives, their partners, and how to make their experience holistic and enriching and rewarding in different ways. The other area is a little bit outside of financial technology, but I think it needs to be solved with technologies. How do we start thinking about, Josh, you did touch on it. You sort of stole my 2 points I was thinking about. The other one was mental health. And what are we doing to really, what is being done in this ecosystem to facilitate that? Because it can't be 24/7, 365. You burn out really quickly. So that's one area. And Eric, going back to the financial tools, and financial tools to me are more than just the enablement of running your business. How do you build your future? And that's something that I'm starting to see a little bit more movement towards that. Jelly Smack is doing some really interesting things, starting to think about the creator space more broadly. And they've hired somebody to really focus on sort of financial tools within their ecosystem. And I'm wondering, when we start to broaden it, is how do we help these folks that are doing either side hustles that have become full-time hustles, which eventually maybe they become personalities, but somewhere in the middle, we've got to empower them and help them also position themselves for their life and not just for the 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, no, those are really good points. And as I think about it, and let's go back to Paco for a minute. We'll bring Josh back in a couple seconds here. But when I think about it, we have all this digital transformation that's happening everywhere. I mean, you could argue that the creator economy, the gig economy, the sharing economy, these are all sort of massive movements within a broader digital transformation of business. And you figure AI is a big part of this, machine learning is a big part of this. And what I see happening that's very encouraging is more and more companies are figuring out that with machine learning and AI in particular, you can offer suggestions to people. It's not a question of just turning over the reins to some algorithm. You don't want to do that with your business. I mean, you can use these technologies, but the sort of the storyline, the media storyline around AI is, oh, it's going to take over and we won't need people anymore. And that is all just total nonsense. I promise you, the AI, if anything, it's helping you understand what's possible and making suggestions to you. So you're seeing this. I mean, Google's doing some very good stuff here. Lots of different players in the data space are doing this, where you get recommendations on things. You say, hey, this came in, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. And that's a way of these payer organizations offering sort of an add-on service, which is, sort of mini consultative type tidbits that you're getting. But I think what we're going to see is more and more of these suggestions coming in from the platforms. Well, hey, have you thought of doing this? Have you thought of doing that? And it's a way of really helping the individual creator better understand how to manage their time. I mean, you kind of see it too in phones, and and how Google will put the little sleepy time logo if you're after hours of what you're normally supposed to be using. But the thing is, we're learning a lot about ourselves by just looking at the phone and looking at our time that we spend on email versus social versus whatever. And that's good because it's a feedback loop for us ourselves to better what we're doing. Right, Paco?
Absolutely. And, I sort of, I'll take a step back a little bit. Besides having full-time employment, I'm a small business owner on the side. And it's a retail convenience store. And the reason I share this with you is primarily because of this particular topic. When talk about the platform that I'm on, so I use one of the big platforms. It's not Shopify, but it's somebody like who supports small businesses and merchants. They, on their dashboard, surface to me different offerings, whether it's working capital, whether it's, hey, did you know we had checking accounts to support small businesses? Did you know that we have payroll services and we can provide you third-party insurance services and things like that? That sort of simplifies my back office and lets me focus on sort of the business at hand, right? And it's no different when we think about sort of, from my perspective, this creator economy as it continues to grow and build and these ecosystems grow and build. The platforms themselves have to think and have to continue to iterate to create a much more holistic experience so the creators can continue to create, but have tools to help them manage their day-to-day that are all part of the one sort of unified experience. And that's where I see some real value in that connectivity.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Josh, you want to chime in?
Yeah, so I think when you think about these kind of software tools for creators, you got to remember that these are not IT departments. They do not have integration engineers. They don't want to do a bunch of developer work and API connection. And so, if phase 3 of the creator economy was these creators leaving the major social networks, building their own stacks of tools and their own teams to help them focus so that the creator themselves can focus on the creative work, and they have this team and tool that can help them get through a lot of more of the busy work, the behind the scenes production work. I think that's a really important next step. But we also saw this massive proliferation of point solutions that were all siloed, all these different little tools to do every different part, from your merchandise to your live events, to building your CRM and your email and phone number lists, to, promoting new types of media you're doing or holding events or monetizing. They were all separate. And that makes it really tough for creators. And so increasingly, we're seeing these aggregations of tools are really helpful. And so you have on like the podcast side, you have Red Circle. They do both, instant distribution of your podcast to every type of platform, but they can also help you do the monetization. They can help you insert pre-roll and mid-roll ads, collaborate with other creators to invite each other to do guest like hooks and promotions on each other's shows, or things like Truffle.vip, which helps big game streamers, these big Twitch and YouTube stars that stream themselves playing video games. It gives them a Chrome extension that their fans can install that helps track those fans' engagement with the creator across different platforms, so the creators can actually reward them. And so and the same company also helps them build their own websites. And so the ability to have a website that's integrated with your CRM, that's integrated with your payments, and actually lets you keep track of who your biggest fans are, that's what is really going a long way, because you don't want every single creator to have to also be an amazing product manager, an amazing data scientist on top of their existing creative work. And I think that's actually a big key to improving mental health for creators, is taking more of that busy work, more of those things they're not experts in, off of the table so that they can focus on what they're truly passionate about.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm reminding myself of the value of controlling your destiny, at least to a certain point, right? And so what Josh mentioned earlier is really important, folks, that when you build up, either it's a LinkedIn following or a Twitter following or your email database, you take that with you when you go. So if you're working for company X and you're building up this presence on LinkedIn, well, guess what? When you leave, you still have your LinkedIn, you still have your Twitter. And I know, Josh, you had a point about not necessarily picking just one poison. Go ahead with that.
Totally. I think it makes sense. You're like, oh, if I pour all my effort into this one platform, then, when it grows, I can really see something substantial. It's not like a fragmented audience amidst a bunch of platforms. But that relies on the stability of that platform, which you can never guarantee. So you have this great example, which is Vine. Vine was the short form 6-second video product that Twitter actually acquired before its launch. And it became super popular. It had about 80 million users, very ahead of its time in the early 2010s, mid 2010s, but Twitter never really supported it. Twitter was going through a cash crunch, and eventually they decided that they were going to shut down this platform rather than just keep it open. And what that meant was that the Vine stars who had spent all their time on Vine and weren't trying to cross promote their other presences, they lost everything, all their followers. All of that hard-earned audience that they had built up disappeared overnight. Whereas the ones that were saying, they were hedging their bets. They were saying, every 5th video or so, I should probably do something that references my YouTube content, my Instagram content, shows people that I have other presences they could follow. That way, if the Vine algorithm turns against me, if the platform just stops being as popular over time, or heaven forbid it truly gets shut down, I'm not left out in the cold. And it's the same when you diversify investments, is making sure that you have your things in different buckets, so that if one whole bucket goes down, you don't lose everything. That said, I think one of the most powerful strategies for creators or anybody who's trying to break into the creator economy is to look for new platforms and over invest in time. And so I did this with Clubhouse. Clubhouse was this audio platform for live audio shows, kind of like doing a podcast in front of a live digital audience. And when I joined, there weren't very many journalists there. I was actually the first journalist allowed on the platform because I promised I wouldn't write about things that were private or off the record. And by investing more time there than other people were at the time, just going above that content average, that content bar average, I was able to build this huge following. I ended up with 4.5 million followers on Clubhouse in the course of 6 months. It took me 10 years to get to 90,000 followers on Twitter. And it took me 6 months to get to 4 million followers on Clubhouse. And so if you look for these new social networks, you find ones that you think really have something different, something unique, something defensible, and then you over-invest time before anybody else realizes it, you can grow to be the sort of default person to follow on that network. And then everybody who joins is joining underneath you and rising the tide that's lifting your boat. And so, and sometimes it might fall through. You might say, oh, that platform didn't actually end up working out. It didn't end up being that popular. I wasted that time, but probably not that much time compared to the day-to-day rigor of just creating for these major social networks. And so I think if you can find those new networks, whatever kind of aligns with your creation style, your level of expertise, are you great on video? Are you great on audio? Are you great on text? Finding the skill set that matches yours with the medium, and then over-investing in new platforms, you can suddenly find yourself the king of a rising hill.
I love it. I love king of the rising hill. Start your own thing and be the superhero in your world. And as Josh is suggesting here, you focus on what matters.
It's so much harder otherwise.
That's right. Focus on what matters to you. Well, folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back for our final segment. You are listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis. We're talking all things the creator economy, the foundations for the creator economy. There are lots of different foundations. We're getting great advice here from Josh Constine of Signal Fire. And folks, I strongly encourage you to hop online and look for their whole matrix they built around the creator economy. Just look up Signal Fire and just Google creator economy. It should come right to you. And we were talking in the break there about the slowdown, economic slowdown, a recession, 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. So what's going to happen here? I do believe that influencers are going to be really important, but influencers also, humility goes a long way. So don't think that you're too important. Always remain relevant and engaged in whatever topic it is that you're focused on. And again, you're going to get energy every day to do it because you love that stuff. So Josh, tell us a bit about how you think the creator economy will help us pull out of a bit of a slowdown here.
Yeah, so I still think that there's this massive shift going from celebrity to creator. So the concept there is a celebrity is this broadcast, one size fits none celebrity. They usually only interact with their audience through things like movies, TV, or press junkets. They don't have a real dialogue with their audience, and they're great. I love going to see their content, but I don't care what they buy, and I don't care what they recommend that I buy. Versus the shift towards creators, which are much more focused on a very specific subcultural niche or weird sort of quirk or interest subtopic that their audience is interested in. They listen to their audience, they make content in reaction to it, they actually make their fans feel seen and heard, and they seem a lot more like their fans. Their fans actually think, oh, if I could one day be like them. And so those product recommendations from those creators go a really long way. And that's why we're seeing right now in the downturn, creator-led brands have a huge opportunity because they don't have to pay for distribution. They don't have to pay for ads to get attention. Their creator founder themselves can just post about the brand and get a ton of audience out of it. And that's so important during this economic downturn because a lot of venture funds that used to fund big D2C brands or other types of businesses aren't willing to pay for ad-based growth right now. They want product-led growth. And so influencer-led brands, I think, are going to fare a lot better in this downturn than the kind of brands that have historically paid to get some other influencer to talk about them. Meanwhile, I think the problem is that in large, these marketing budgets for major brands are decreasing due to the recession. And what that means is that they're just paying less to those creators in sponsorships. And so what I think you will see is a lot of major creators who grew up and gained fame during the pandemic when people were locked down, they were stuck staring at their screens all day, that maybe they were able to build audience at that point, but now that people are back out in the world, and especially as those brand dollars decrease, it becomes harder and harder to build a sustainable business there. And so instead, I think what you'll see is the creator economy will largely be a feeder into creative industries in traditional business. And so you'll use your YouTube profile, your TikTok profile to say, hey, maybe I didn't grow the biggest fan base. Maybe I didn't get to 1 million followers, but I was able to make content that looks really good, feels really compelling. It just didn't quite hit with the right audience. And then a brand will say, oh, well, if you come and do that for us, we can see you have the production skills. Come and do this for us and get a traditional job as a creative director, as a video script writer, as a videographer in this business. And so you'll see the creator economy be a feeder into those spaces. But for the other creators that do really make it, I think they need strong partners and strong technology infrastructure. And especially they need working capital. So one way to get that working capital you see is from things like Carrot, which is a credit card for creators. It actually looks at a creator's engagement rate, following, how much their fans really loved them, and gives them a credit score based on that so that they can go and pay for video editors or sets or production costs so they can make that content and then get paid back when all of those fans that Carrot has seen really engage with them, really buy from them, finally do see that content and pay for it, or that gets monetized in other ways. So I think that working capital is so important because small businesses all have that opportunity to get these loans for working capital. But if you go to a bank as a creator and you tell them, I sell videos on the internet, give me a loan, they just assume you're in pornography and they will ban you, if anything. They won't, let alone giving you working capital. And then the other way is working with venture funds that really understand this business and actually can help, because there are a lot of creator-driven businesses out there where their investors, they can give them great money, but do they really help otherwise? And I think that's what we kind of see ourselves as at Signalfire is we think of ourselves as being a co-creator of businesses by helping them with everything they need help with. Recruiting, we built this huge recruiting engine, ranks hundreds of millions of people on skill level and hireability, so that our portfolio companies can use it to find the best employees so they can grow themselves really quickly. Or, I run a PR advisory program based on my time at TechCrunch, and we just hired the CMO of Stripe to help our companies with marketing efforts. And so I think, if you can find really strong partners for your business, and especially if you can get creators into equity incentivized positions to help you grow your business, you can really grow a lot faster. And so I think that's what we're going to see in this next wave of the creator economy, is creators also becoming the founders of more businesses, because they know they're a lot like athletes. Where like, yeah, you could be the best basketball player in the world, but like, you're not going to play for 50 years. At some point, some of that money is going to fall off. And so a lot of these creators are saying, I might be pretty and popular and fun and be the coolest guy in town right now, but what am I going to be in 10 years? I need to start building a nest egg. And that's why they're starting to invest in, take equity from, do advisorships, or become co-founders of major startups, so that they can build that equity, so they hopefully have something to turn to as a business after their fame eventually starts to wane.
Yeah, and those are all excellent points. And I just threw out a couple other thoughts here for folks to consider. Whatever your passion is, there are going to be organizations and companies, potential prospects, clients, partners, all these people. Put yourself in the middle. Figure out how you can get in between these worlds and spend your time with them. I mean, you can, if you really want to dive into something, you can go volunteer somewhere. If you're into music, start volunteering at a theater or at some music venue, for example, and just spend time in these environments, spend time getting to know these people. If you put yourself in the middle, I tell you what, everyone's looking for help these days. There are help wanted signs all over the place. And it's in part because we're coming out of the pandemic, but it's also in part because everything is changing and you have all these new ways that you can make money. So don't hide, don't just do it virtually, just don't, just send emails and things like this. Get out there in the world and talk to people. And then the other interesting point that Josh mentioned, I think is very important, is analytics. So some of these lenders now can just tap into your YouTube account. They can tap into your LinkedIn or whatever it is and gauge, as he's suggesting, how much currency you have. And if you have a good network, that is to your advantage as well. So we're going to see a lot more data-driven insights. And I'll throw it over to Paco for some closing comments here. The financial side is really important. Where are you spending your money? How does that compare to industry norms? You seem to be spending more money than other people in advertising, or more money than other people in operations, or whatever the case may be. It helps to know what other people are doing, and the data is always really important. Real quick, what do you think, Paco?
Well, I think the points are really interesting that we've been talking about. They mostly focus on what I would consider sort of like enterprise creators. Like, these are big brands themselves. And Eric, what you're touching on is just a broader ecosystem. And there are the people that are on 10 channels, and they are making a few bucks here, a few bucks there. Ultimately, they still have the same challenges that an enterprise level creator does. Like, where's my nest egg? How am I going to build my future? How am I going to grow my brand? How am I going to grow my business? So the more tools that are out there to help enable and empower that, even at the sort of the smaller personalities, the better, because those tools will mature over time. Best in class shines, and then you have a real sort of administrative sort of back office ecosystem that's available for the creative space.
To follow the companies in your space. So there are companies doing similar things as you are. Pay attention to what they're doing. There are tools like Crunchbase, for example. You can hop on Crunchbase and see all the new companies that are coming down the pike, all the new companies that are getting investment. What are they doing? Try to align yourself. Do that old classic Venn diagram, is how I like to describe it. Do a Venn diagram of the things that you really like to do, the things that can make you money, and the things that you're really good at. Right, and kind of understand that and be willing to grow and change over time. I guess real like 30 seconds, I'll throw it over to Josh for final comments. Be ready to grow and to change what you're doing, right, Josh?
Yeah, I'll say that it's just never too late is maybe the most important message. That building an audience for what you are an expert in, no matter how big it is, will be valuable. You don't need millions of followers if you're in a really niche, wonky industry. Start a LinkedIn, start an email list, join Twitter if you haven't already, and just start to talk about what you care about, because writing in public and sharing in public as a way to build audience is an actual superpower. And I think that anybody has the opportunity to do do it, no matter what scale, you will find value even out of a small scale audience, because that'll be the most intimate audience. And you'll be a creator that actually listens to them, unlike these ones with millions of followers that never hear what they comment.
That's exactly right. And, there's a guy, Dan Lefave, I suggest you guys look up Lefave. He's the systems guy. He had a great video where he said, what happens at the door of indecision? Nothing. He said, articulate your thoughts, write your thoughts down. That's when they become real. That's when they take off. We'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.